let my sister stay with us after her divorce. I never imagined she'd thank me by stealing my husband. Part 1. The Invitation. When my sister Rachel showed up at our door with red-rimmed eyes and a suitcase that looked heavier than her body, I didn't hesitate. I hugged her, led her inside, and told her she could stay as long as she needed. She had just gone through a messy divorce. Her husband cheated on her, of all things, and I felt it was the least I could do. We were sisters, after all. Family. And what is family if not the net that catches you when life drops you from the sky? My husband Daniel was warm but distant when she arrived. He offered to carry her bag and helped her set up the guest room, but beyond the polite smiles, he stayed mostly quiet. I chalked it up to exhaustion. He'd been working long hours at the firm, preparing for an upcoming merger that could earn him a partner title. Stress made him distant lately, but that wasn't new. Marriage, I told myself, had seasons. We were just going through winter. Rachel settled in quickly, too quickly maybe. By the end of the first week, she was baking banana bread in my kitchen like it was her own. She took over folding laundry and made a habit of brewing Daniel's favorite coffee blend every morning before he woke up. At first, I was grateful. With work, a toddler to chase, and a third round of IVF weighing heavily on my body, the help was welcome. But then came the small things, the untraceable shifts in atmosphere. I'd walk into the room and feel like a conversation had just ended. Daniel started coming home earlier but spending more time in the guest room, claiming Rachel needed someone to talk to. One night, I walked in on them sitting too close on the couch, laughing over an old episode of Friends, their knees nearly touching. Rachel looked up at me like I had interrupted something sacred. Daniel barely acknowledged me. Still, I silenced the voice inside me. The one that whispered this felt wrong. She's your sister, I reminded myself. She'd never. And Daniel? He'd been my best friend since college. The guy who once stood in the pouring rain for 3 hours just to meet my dad and win his approval. The man who held my hand through every fertility disappointment and kissed my forehead every night without fail. He wasn't perfect, but he was mine. Until one night he wasn't. I woke around midnight to pee, the joys of hormone injections, and noticed the bed was empty beside me. I padded softly down the hallway, the silence of the house broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the old wooden floorboards. As I passed the guest room, I saw the faint glow of light beneath the door. I thought maybe Rachel couldn't sleep, or maybe Daniel had gone to check on her. They were both night owls, and I didn't want to disturb them. But something pulled me closer, something instinctual, primal. I stood there, holding my breath, listening. A laugh, her laugh. Then his voice, low and familiar, but not in the way it should have been. I couldn't make out the words, just the tone. Intimate. Warm. It was the tone he used to save for me. I knocked softly, pretending I needed Tylenol. The voices hushed. A long pause. Then the door opened. Rachel, wide-eyed, with her robe slightly off-center, cheeks flushed. Daniel wasn't in sight, but I knew. I knew in the pit of my stomach. In the way her gaze wouldn't meet mine. And in the way I suddenly realized she was wearing his old college sweatshirt. Just talking, she said quickly, stepping into the hallway. He was helping me with, some thoughts I had. Couldn't sleep. Right, I said, my voice numb. Of course. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the silence. The next day I confronted Daniel, not with accusations, with hope. I needed him to tell me I was wrong, that I was imagining things, but his reaction was colder than I expected. Defensive, dismissive. You're tired, he said. You've been under stress. Don't turn this into something it's not. But he never looked me in the eye. And Rachel? She started avoiding me. She left the house more often, but always returned when Daniel was home. She no longer made coffee in the mornings, and when I entered a room, she left. Something was unraveling, and I was holding the thread in my hand, terrified to pull. Part 2. The thread unravels. I stopped trusting my own instincts long before the affair confirmed them. That's the thing about slow betrayal. It doesn't crash into your life like a wave. It seeps in like smoke under a door, quiet, undeniable, suffocating. The morning after I caught them talking, Rachel was already gone before sunrise. She left a note on the counter in her familiar looping script. Ran to grab some groceries, be back soon. A lie dressed up as kindness. Daniel acted normal, too normal. He sat at the table with a newspaper and that fake easy calm that made me want to scream. I watched him stir his coffee with my favorite spoon. My stomach twisted. "So," I asked, keeping my tone as casual as I could, "what were you and Rachel talking about last night?" He didn't flinch, just kept stirring. "Nothing serious. She's still pretty torn up about the divorce." "Right," I said, staring at the cup in his hands like it might explode. "Torn up." He looked at me then, just briefly, and I swear there was something behind his eyes. Pity, regret, or guilt. It vanished too quickly to name. I waited until he left for work before I checked Rachel's room. I needed something, anything, to prove I wasn't losing my mind. Her suitcase was unzipped, clothes neatly folded, my lotion on her nightstand, my perfume. And tucked under her pillow like a cruel joke was a worn Polaroid of the three of us from a trip to Lake Tahoe. Rachel in the middle, Daniel on the left, me on the right. Her arm linked through his, her head tilted toward him. Too close, even back then. That night I asked her when she planned to move out. She blinked. "Why?" "I think it's time," I said, trying not to shake. "You've been here over a month. You've got a job now. I think we need space." Rachel's mouth fell open slightly. Then she smiled. Not kindly, not nervously. It was the smile of someone who had nothing left to hide. "Sure," she said, "if that's what you want." She didn't ask Daniel. She didn't seem surprised, and I knew. 2 nights later it rained, the kind of heavy, relentless rain that makes everything feel heavier. Daniel was late coming home, said he had a work dinner. But I already knew there was no dinner. I'd already seen the calendar notification on his phone. Our dinner, 7 p.m., La Sorella. I didn't ask questions, I didn't scream or cry. Instead, I called a friend, the one person left who hadn't lied to me, and asked if she could take our son for the night. And then I waited. At 10:42 p.m., the front door opened. He stepped in like a thief, trying not to make a sound. His hair was wet. His jacket smelled like wine. And when he saw me sitting in the dark, on the couch, he froze. "You're home early," I said, my voice like steel. He didn't say anything for a long time, just looked at me and then down. And maybe it was the silence, or the way he couldn't even try to lie anymore, but something broke open inside me. "Just tell me the truth," I said. He closed his eyes. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he whispered. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. That line, that excuse. "You didn't mean for it to happen." As if you could fall into someone else's bed the way you trip on a stair. He sat down across from me, dripping guilt all over the floor. "I was lonely," he said. "I was infertile," I replied. "That's not the same thing." He winced. "That's not what I meant." "But it's what you felt, isn't it?" I interrupted. "When I couldn't give you a baby, when I cried myself to sleep over every failed round of IVF, when I bled in silence and still showed up for life, you decided that was too much. You wanted joy. You wanted ease. You wanted my sister." "I didn't plan it," he said again, his voice shaking, "and yet you managed it just fine." There was no screaming, no throwing things, just two people sitting in the wreckage of what used to be a marriage, staring at the ashes. And then he said something I'll never forget. "She understands me in a way you don't anymore." That was the moment I stopped loving him. I didn't cry, not until he left the room, and then I collapsed, not from heartbreak but from the relief of finally seeing the truth. Part 3. Shattered Reflections. The next morning I packed his things in silence, not all of them, just enough for him to understand it wasn't a fight, it was a decision. Shirts folded like folded years, ties knotted with the weight of vows broken, his toothbrush tossed into a plastic bag like it never belonged beside mine. Daniel didn't say much when he saw the suitcase, just stood there in the doorway like a man caught in someone else's bad dream. Maybe it was guilt, maybe just cowardice. "I'll stay at my brother's," he mumbled. I didn't answer. I didn't owe him words anymore. He left before noon. No hug, no final speech, no apology big enough to cover the damage he'd done. Just the soft click of the door, like a period at the end of a sentence I never wanted to write. But Rachel didn't leave. She acted like nothing happened. Still came into the kitchen barefoot. Still hummed while she brewed her coffee. Still texted on the couch where she used to laugh beside me. I watched her from across the room, numb, empty. When I finally confronted her, it wasn't loud. It wasn't a scene. I just stood in the doorway of her borrowed bedroom and said, "You have until Friday to be gone." She glanced up from her phone. Seriously? You've already taken what mattered. Just don't take your time. Rachel rolled her eyes like I was the problem. You're overreacting. You two were basically separated anyway. I took a step closer, breathing through the fury. You watched me break, sat beside me during fertility treatments. You held my hand when I cried about him. And the whole time you were sleeping with him. She shrugged. You weren't happy. Neither was he. And in that moment, I realized some people don't just betray you. They rewrite the entire narrative to justify it, to sleep at night. You're poison, I said calmly, and you were never my friend. That Friday, she left. No goodbye, no apology, just silence and the faint smell of her perfume on my couch cushions. I opened all the windows that night and let the cold rush in. I wanted the house to feel empty. I needed it to feel mine again. But grief is tricky. It doesn't just hit once, it lingers. The following weeks were a blur of pain and pretending. I went to work, smiled at neighbors, took long showers I didn't need just to cry where no one could hear me. And then one evening, I found a letter tucked inside a drawer in Daniel's old nightstand. Handwritten, unsent, dated 3 weeks before I discovered the truth. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I still love her, but I feel like I'm disappearing in this life we built. Rachel makes me feel seen, like I exist again. But I hate myself for this. I don't know how to stop. I read it 3 times, and then I burned it. I didn't want his confusion. I didn't need his guilt dressed up as honesty. He hadn't chosen me when it mattered. That was enough. The healing didn't start in a dramatic moment. It began in small choices, new bed sheets, cooking dinner for myself, laughing, really laughing, with a coworker over coffee, rearranging furniture, picking up the shattered pieces and placing them differently. Sometimes survival looks like starting over one drawer at a time. Part 4. The ghosts they left behind. It's strange how quiet the house felt once they were gone. You'd think I'd welcome the silence, that it would feel peaceful, cleansing. But no, it echoed with everything they left behind. Not just the things I could pack into boxes or throw into trash bags, but the invisible weight of memory. Every room was haunted. The kitchen still smelled like the coffee she brewed each morning. The hallway creaked the same way it did when Daniel used to come home late. And the bedroom, our bedroom, was the worst. Not because of what happened there, but because of everything that didn't. The promises, the closeness, the love that had quietly disappeared long before I found out. I tried sleeping in the guest room, but even that felt infected. So I moved to the couch for a while. I couldn't bring myself to lie in the bed we once shared. I'd sit there at night with the TV flickering, not watching, just trying to stay distracted enough to keep from drowning in my own thoughts. But the ghosts didn't care about distractions. One night, I opened my photo albums. I told myself I was going to throw them out, but I didn't. I flipped through them like a masochist, remembering every anniversary, every stupid selfie at the beach, every birthday dinner where we smiled like nothing could touch us. I wasn't looking at a marriage. I was looking at a funeral of a life I thought I was living. But buried in the middle was a photo I had forgotten. Just me, laughing, standing in front of a bookstore with a paper bag full of new novels, hair messy, eyes alive. I didn't remember the exact day, but I could tell. I had been happy, on my own, before him. It hit me then. I hadn't just lost a husband and a friend. I had lost myself somewhere along the way. I had folded myself smaller to make space for his moods. I had poured energy into fixing things while he quietly let them fall apart. I had been surviving, not thriving, and I was tired of it. So I began to take pieces back. Not all at once, just in small, deliberate ways. I painted the bedroom, got rid of the couch where she used to sit, donated their leftovers. I even changed my phone number. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. Then came the day I ran into Daniel at the grocery store. I was reaching for apples when I heard his voice behind me. Hey. I froze for a second, then turned. He looked tired, not thinner, not unwell, just dim, like a man who'd realized too late that he'd lost more than he understood. Hi, I said. Cool, even. He gave a small nod. You look good. I didn't thank him. I didn't need to. He hesitated. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. You're right, I cut in. It doesn't. Silence stretched between us like a crack in the ground. He looked down, then up again. She's gone. Didn't last. I almost laughed. But instead I said, of course she is. His eyes widened a bit. He wasn't used to this version of me. Sharp, unyielding, free. I turned back to the apples. Good luck, Daniel. He didn't follow, didn't plead. Just stood there as I walked away, bag in hand, spine straight. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't second guess myself. I just drove home, put on music, and danced barefoot in the kitchen. That night, for the first time in months, I slept in my bed. My bed, alone, whole, healing. Part 5. A new kind of sunrise. The first true morning after it all, not the day after the explosion, not the week of silence, not even the moment I saw Daniel in the store, but the real morning, came unexpectedly. I woke up before the sun. The room was quiet but no longer heavy. My heart wasn't racing. My eyes didn't sting. The nightmares that used to claw at my chest were gone. Instead, there was stillness. A kind of stillness that didn't ask me to be okay. It simply allowed me to exist. I got up and opened the windows. The air was crisp, and the sky still held that deep navy blue right before dawn. It felt like the world hadn't decided who it wanted to be yet, like I could shape the day from scratch. I brewed coffee, not for him, not for anyone, just for me. And then I opened my journal. For months, my journal had been a graveyard of words, confusion, grief, rage, loss. But that morning, I started with a sentence I hadn't written in what felt like years. Today, I choose myself. Simple, brave, mine. Choosing myself wasn't dramatic. It didn't mean booking a spontaneous trip or cutting off all contact. It meant showing up for me, brushing my hair even when no one would see, taking walks without destination, learning to be okay with empty spaces. I began cooking for one, reading again, laughing without guilt. I reconnected with people I had pushed away, not to talk about the pain, but to remember who I was before it. My sister came over one afternoon with wine and old photo albums. We sat cross-legged on the floor and laughed until our stomachs hurt. Not once did we mention Daniel. Then, one evening while out for dinner with an old colleague, he asked me something that caught me off guard. "So, what do you want now? Not just after all this, but now, for real." I opened my mouth and froze. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I finally realized I hadn't let myself dream in years. I had been managing, maintaining, reacting, but I hadn't dared to want something for just me. So I took a breath and said, "I want to write. I want to finally finish the novel I started 6 years ago." He smiled. "Then write it." So I did. I rearranged the spare room, the one they used to sneak into behind my back, and turned it into a writing space. New desk, soft chair, candles, peace. And I began, one paragraph at a time. My pain became plot, my confusion, character, my strength story. Some days were hard. Healing isn't linear. Sometimes I still woke up with a lump in my throat. Sometimes I still replayed things I wished I'd said. But those moments became softer, lighter. And each time I reminded myself, I survived what tried to break me, and I'm building something stronger. One rainy Saturday, I passed the old cafe where Daniel and I used to go on Sundays. I paused outside the window. Inside, a couple sat where we used to, laughing, holding hands, lost in a world of their own. I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel jealous. I simply felt free. I turned, pulled my coat tighter around me, and kept walking. Because the story I'm writing now doesn't end in betrayal. It begins with me.